The towering spires of the alien embassy loomed over the cityscape, their dark, iridescent surfaces reflecting the waning sunlight. Inside the grand hall, the air was tense with the murmur of anxious delegates. The room was adorned with holographic displays and alien art, casting an eerie glow on the assembled humans. Lieutenant Commander James Carter stood at the forefront, his uniform impeccable, eyes scanning the crowd with a mix of determination and apprehension. The alien ambassador Zarnus strode into the hall with an imposing presence. His six-legged frame and bioluminescent skin shimmered under the artificial lights, an unsettling contrast to the more familiar human forms. As he approached the podium, the room fell silent. Zarnus's voice, a deep, resonant growl, filled the space with an air of authority. "Greetings, Earth representatives. I am Zarnus of the Drillarian Concord. We have come to propose a unique form of connection with your planet." Carter's eyes narrowed. The Drillarian race had a reputation for their aggressive tactics and unyielding demands. The term, connection, was particularly unsettling, hinting at something far more intrusive than mere diplomacy. Beside him, Dr. Emily Reyes, a xenobiologist with a keen interest in alien cultures, shifted uneasily. "What exactly do you mean by connection?" Carter's voice cut through the murmur. Zarnus's eyes gleamed with an inscrutable light. "Our species has observed a remarkable trait in your female population. We wish to engage with them in a cultural exchange." A chill swept through the room. The implication was clear: the Drillarian customs involved practices that many found offensive. Carter's pulse quickened. This was more than a diplomatic faux pas, it was an affront to human dignity. "I believe you're mistaken," Carter said, his tone steady despite the turmoil inside. "We cannot allow such demands." Zarnus's expression remained inscrutable. "Our offer is not negotiable. We seek a meaningful interaction, or we shall reconsider our stance towards your planet." The tension in the room thickened. Carter could sense the unease of the assembled officials and the mounting pressure. This was not just a matter of diplomacy, it was a direct challenge to Earth's sovereignty. "Lieutenant Commander," Zarnus's voice softened, but the menace was palpable. "You have 1 week to prepare your response. Any failure to comply will be interpreted as a refusal of our offer." As Zarnus exited, Dr. Reyes leaned closer to Carter, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do now?" Carter's mind raced, weighing the potential fallout. The Drillarian race was known for their formidable technology and fierce combat skills. Confronting them directly could lead to open conflict. Yet, failing to address their demands might be seen as a sign of weakness. "I'll need to convene an emergency briefing," Carter said, his gaze fixed on the retreating form of Zarnus. "We have to find a way to handle this without escalating the situation." The room buzzed with fragmented conversations as Carter led Reyes and Lieutenant Raj Patel, a tech-savvy officer known for his strategic acumen, out of the hall. Patel's face was a mask of concentration as he followed Carter's instructions to prepare for the impending crisis. As the doors of the embassy closed behind them, Carter glanced at the darkening sky. The stakes had never been higher. He knew that navigating this diplomatic minefield would require every ounce of his skill and cunning. The fate of Earth's relations with the Drillarian Concord hung in the balance. In the stillness that followed, Carter's resolve hardened. He would protect Earth's dignity, no matter the cost. But first, he needed to understand the true nature of the Drillarians' connection and how to confront it without igniting a war. The briefing room was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the alien embassy. Lieutenant Commander James Carter, Dr. Emily Reyes, and Lieutenant Raj Patel gathered around a holographic table, its projection flickering with data and schematics. The air was thick with urgency. Carter tapped a button, and the image of Zarnus's imposing form appeared. "We've got 1 week to address the Drillarians' demands," he said, his voice steady but laced with tension. "We need to understand their true intentions before making any decisions." Reyes, her brow furrowed in concern, examined the holographic display. "From what we know, the Drillarians' cultural practices are extreme, to say the least. Their concept of connection could involve anything from a formal exchange to something much more invasive." Patel, who had been quiet until now, shifted in his seat. We should start by digging into the Drillarian archives. There might be records or intercepted communications that could give us insights into their motives. Carter nodded. Agreed. Patel, you and Reyes will focus on this. I'll coordinate with the diplomatic corps to prepare a potential counterproposal. We need a strategy that maintains our dignity but also avoids escalating the situation. As Patel and Reyes left to access the Drillarian data, Carter's thoughts turned to the possible outcomes. He knew that any misstep could lead to severe repercussions. The Drillarian race was not known for their patience, and their aggressive nature could easily lead to conflict if they felt disrespected. Meanwhile, Reyes and Patel immersed themselves in the task. The room was filled with the soft hum of computers and the occasional beeping of data processing. Reyes scanned through cultural documents and historical data, while Patel sifted through encrypted communications. An hour later, Reyes looked up, her face pale. I found something. There's a pattern in their previous diplomatic encounters, something that wasn't obvious before. The Drillarian ambassador Zarnes has a history of pushing boundaries to assert dominance. Patel nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard. It looks like they've employed similar tactics in other negotiations. They push until the other party either complies or fights back. It's a high-stakes game of intimidation. Carter, who had joined them to review their findings, rubbed his temples. So, it's not just about making a connection. They're testing our resolve. Yes, Reyes confirmed. And if we give in to their demands without a strong counter, it might set a dangerous precedent. They'll see it as a sign of weakness. Carter straightened, determination hardening his features. We need to find a way to turn their strategy against them. We have to show strength but also offer a reasonable compromise. It's a delicate balance. As they prepared to draft a counterproposal, the lights in the briefing room flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of impending confrontation. Carter knew that their next steps were crucial. Any sign of weakness could lead to a swift and potentially violent reaction from the Drillarian race. Let's get this right, Carter said, looking at his team with a steely resolve. We have one chance to handle this correctly. Failure is not an option. The sun had barely risen over the city when Carter and his team assembled in the war room, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The hours of sleepless nights and relentless planning had culminated in this crucial moment. A giant screen on the wall displayed the diplomatic proposal they had painstakingly crafted, a blend of firm resistance and tentative compromise. Lieutenant Commander Carter's eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of his key personnel. Dr. Emily Reyes was examining a data pad with a furrowed brow, while Lieutenant Raj Patel was at a console, updating the proposal based on the latest intelligence. The team's collective focus was palpable. Carter cleared his throat. This is it. Our counterproposal goes to Zarnes in a matter of hours. We need to ensure that it conveys both strength and flexibility. No mistakes. Reyes looked up, her expression grave. We've incorporated concessions that might appease their need for a connection without compromising our core values. But I'm worried. If Zarnes sees this as a sign of weakness, we might face even harsher demands. Patel chimed in, his fingers flying over the keyboard. And we've enhanced the security on the transmission. No room for interception or tampering. As they finalized the proposal, the door slid open with a soft hiss, and an aide rushed in, breathless. Commander Carter, we've detected a breach in the embassy's security system. Carter's pulse quickened. A breach? Are you certain? The aide nodded, looking distressed. Yes, and it's being traced to a high-level access point. It could be an attempt to sabotage our efforts. Carter exchanged a worried glance with Reyes and Patel. We need to act quickly. Patel, trace the breach and determine the source. Reyes, prepare a backup version of the proposal in case we need to send it directly. The room buzzed with frantic activity. Patel's screen flickered with lines of code and security logs. He muttered under his breath, deciphering the encrypted data. Reyes worked efficiently, her fingers moving rapidly over her data pad. After a tense few minutes, Patel's face grew pale. The breach is coming from within the embassy. It looks like an insider is trying to access our proposal. Carter's mind raced. Damn it! We need to warn our contacts at the embassy and secure our transmission immediately. As Patel sent out urgent alerts, Reyes looked up, her face drawn. If they've accessed our proposal, they could manipulate it to suit their own agenda. We need to ensure our counterproposal remains intact. Let's move, Carter ordered. We'll handle the breach from our end while ensuring our diplomatic channels remain secure. The team swiftly enacted their emergency protocols. Carter and Reyes moved to a secure location, coordinating with the embassy's security team to contain the breach. Patel remained at his console, monitoring for any further attempts to compromise their data. Minutes felt like hours as the team worked under immense pressure. Carter's thoughts were a whirl of strategy and countermeasures. He knew that the success of their diplomatic efforts, and possibly the safety of Earth, hinged on this critical moment. Finally, Patel's voice cut through the tension. The breach is contained. We've reinforced our security and sent a clean version of the proposal. Carter let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Good work, everyone. We've managed to keep our position secure. Now we wait for Zarnus's response. As the team regrouped, the weight of the situation hung heavily over them. The chapter closes with Carter and his team standing together, their faces etched with fatigue and determination. The impending response from Zarnus would determine the next steps in their precarious negotiations, and the tension was palpable as they braced for whatever came next. The grand hall of the Drillarian embassy was eerily silent as Carter, Reyes, and Patel waited for the verdict. The vast chamber, adorned with alien insignia and complex symbols, was filled with a tension that was almost palpable. Carter paced back and forth, his mind racing through every possible scenario. Reyes stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the darkened sky outside. If Zarnus rejects our counterproposal, we could be looking at severe repercussions. We've done everything we can to strike a balance, but this is a high-stakes game. Patel, seated at a console, monitored incoming communications. The embassy's systems are on high alert. If there's a response, we'll get it immediately. We just need to stay sharp. Suddenly, the massive doors to the hall creaked open, and Zarnus strode in, his formidable presence commanding attention. The Drillarian ambassador was a towering figure, his eyes glowing with a cold, calculating light. Behind him, two aides carried a sleek, black case. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Carter squared his shoulders and stepped forward, meeting Zarnus's gaze. Ambassador Zarnus, thank you for meeting with us. We await your response to our counterproposal. Zarnus's voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the hall. Your proposal was received and reviewed with great scrutiny. The Drillarian Council has deliberated and reached a decision. Carter's heart raced as he tried to gauge Zarnus's tone. And? Zarnus opened the black case, revealing a holographic projection. The image flickered to life, displaying a modified version of their counterproposal. The alterations were subtle but significant. The Drillarian Council finds your proposal acceptable, Zarnus said, his eyes narrowing slightly. However, we require additional assurances to proceed. A symbolic gesture of goodwill, if you will. Carter's mind raced. The revised terms included a ceremonial act, a gesture that would require Earth's highest leaders to personally acknowledge the Drillarians' superiority in a public forum. It was a compromise, but it also came with a price. Reyes stepped forward, her voice steady. We are willing to meet the requirements, but we need to ensure that this gesture does not undermine our position or dignity. Zarnus inclined his head slightly. Very well. The Council expects your leaders to make a formal declaration within the next 3 days. Failure to comply will result in further demands, which could be less favorable. The tension in the room thickened. Carter knew that accepting these terms could be seen as a concession, but refusing might provoke the Drillarians' wrath. The balance between diplomacy and defiance was precarious. We will comply with the terms, Carter said, his voice firm. However, we request that you confirm this agreement in writing and outline any further implications. Zarnus's gaze lingered for a moment before he nodded. Agreed. The details will be provided shortly. As Zarnus and his aides departed, the weight of the decision settled heavily on Carter and his team. The symbolic gesture would be a public declaration that might impact Earth's political landscape and its relationship with the Drillarian race. Reyes turned to Carter, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. We've bought ourselves time, but this gesture is a double-edged sword. Patel, his fingers still hovering over the console, added, we need to prepare for the public reaction. There will be both support and opposition. Carter nodded, his mind already shifting to the next phase of their strategy. We'll draft a statement and prepare our leaders for the declaration. Let's ensure that we control the narrative and present a united front.